Now, Georgia doesn't have the worst government in the world, even the worst government in the region. It doesn't even have the worst government that it has ever had. It could be better, but at least it has been determined not to be used, its country not to be used as a knife in the back of Russia at this troubled time of the war in Ukraine. That's made the United States, the deep state, as well as the superficial front of shop state, very, very angry. The Georgian government tried to bring in a law which would force organizations relying on foreign funding to publish the source and extent of that foreign funding. Not that dramatic or radical a proposal, you might think, especially as it was word for word the actual law in the United States of America, which has precisely the same law. And that notwithstanding, the US went bananas and mobilized all their Trojan horses that they have parked deep inside Georgian civil society, as indeed civil societies all over the world, to try basically to topple the Georgian government. They failed to do so, but they did get the law withdrawn. Now their tanks are back on the lawn. The erstwhile president of Georgia is now running as the hunter of the Russian influence in the state of Georgia. He is trying to get Western support to have another push to overthrow the government in Tbilisi. So let's hear from the front, if you like, from Ilia Lobjanidze, I hope I've said that properly, Ilia Lobjanidze, who is a representative of the Unified Communist Party of Georgia. Ilia, forgive me if I didn't say your second name properly, and feel free to correct me.
It's Lobjanidze, and it's a great honor for me to be on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sorry that I got the name slightly wrong, more
No
than
problem.
slightly, but I don't think I got the politics wrong. You have a government which is not one that you yourself would support, but it's one that is trying to stay out of the war. And you have an opposition in Georgia that, paid for by the United States, is trying to force Georgia into the war. Is that a characterization you recognize?
Yeah, pretty much. We must start with a little history. In 2003, there was a colored revolution, as they call it in Western media. So the current opposition was in power after 2003, and in 2012, they got ousted, and today's government is now in power. So since 2012, NGOs got really strong. The Western finances got really strong, and methodically they infiltrated the embassies, the government, and other places, of power. So last year, when this conflict started or activated in a hot conflict, as you may say it, which was started actually in 2014, we all know. We got bombarded with different places. For example, on YouTube, we found sponsored ads of armed men with masks advising Georgians to take a walk in sunny Sukhumi and Tskhinvali, which are the separatist region capitals of Georgia. We also had the then ombudsman, Miss Nino Longjaria. She was a public defender that publicly said that instead of the shame, she would prefer to the bombs to fly over us. They were feeling shame. But now they're acting like they're trying to gaslight us, like nobody was trying to drag us into the war. Nobody tried to at least provoke Russia, at least. but we all have the videos, we all have the speeches when they say, for example, one of the political leaders said that we should at least hold down 10,000 Russian soldiers, so to make it easier for the Ukrainians. Or one of the bloggers also said that we should just provoke them so we can be in defending side, like this legend that 1 to 3 the ratio would be in our favor in some way. So yeah, it's pretty accurate what you said.
So, what are the chances of this opposition either forcing the government to change or changing the government?
Well, I would say that the threat is real, but it doesn't show that they have actual power to do it yet, and I hope it will continue like that, of course, because in Georgia also has a pretty big social problems right now. Like 95% of our medical healthcare is privatized, and all these things are today very hard. So opposition is trying to speak as this is the organic protest from the grassroots, but it's not. For example, today it's 9th of April. It's in 1989. It was a tragedy then when the Soviet army killed Protestants in our central street. In 91, we had our Declaration of Independence. So 9th April is like symbolic day for Georgians. So they had a demonstration today, but not as much people as they expected showed up. So that's a little hopeful. So that they cannot actually do what they want to do.
These Trojan horses, as I described them, actually Fidel was the first person to describe NGOs as Trojan horses. I was there when he did it. They are supposedly NGOs, but they are GOs. They're government organizations. Unfortunately, in your case, they're not even your own government's organizations. They are FGOs, foreign government organizations. And they litter the landscape. Human rights, liberty, freedom, free speech, free press. They give themselves the nicest possible titles. But in fact, they are agents of a foreign power. Does the Georgian public see that?
Well, yeah, it does instinctively. It doesn't have the like researcher or academic critique of it, of course, but instinctively, intuitively, like it's already like maybe a decade that NGOs have bad name in Georgia because we call it grant eaters. The ordinary people call them grant eaters, and yeah, like people understand who they are and what they do, so there is not much trust in them. That's not a problem, but they trust. But the problem is that people don't actually have time or resources to organize the ordinary people, but they do. So it always turns out like this like amplified voice of these minorities. We hear it much more than ordinary people because ordinary people actually do not speak about politics. That's the actual problem.
What is the overarching feeling of Georgian people about Russia and about Russians? I myself, in former times, visited Georgia several times. Stalin, of course, was a Georgian and the most powerful leader of the USSR. Georgia was prosperous back then, one of the most prosperous of the republics. Georgian restaurants were the best restaurants in the whole of the USSR and could be found everywhere. I don't myself drink alcohol, but people love Georgian wine, they love Georgian food and so on. In other words, in former times, Georgia had a high reputation in the USSR. Was it reciprocated then? Is it reciprocated now?
Well, we must say that we got. You must know the Western outlets when the Soviet Union was also already decided that it would break up, but it hadn't yet. Like they had statistics which republic would be the most successful. So in that outlet, in that publishments, Georgia was considered one of the Asian tigers because it was an industrial agricultural country, republic. But in after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then you must know the coup, it got deindustrialized. Like there's nothing else, nothing working. What was working for them? For example, I'm from Rustavi, and metallurgical plant of Rustavi works only 5-10% of its overall capacity. We have also a chemical plant in Rustavi. It also works maybe 5-10% of the capacity it worked when in the time of Soviet Union. So about the feelings, it's now more of a cultural thing than actual economics. For example, when Soviet Union existed, people could take a choice ideologically, economically. For example, if they wanted socialism, they knew where to go. I'm talking about another, for example, African, if they wanted to socialism, they can go to Soviet Union. If they wanted capitalism, they could go to USA or Britain. But now it's more like a cultural thing, and that's why it's more tense because the people, the old people mostly, and the people who have relatives Russians, or they have been or been culturally closer to Russia, they prefer Russia. But younger people now, because they are already Americanized in Europe, for example, European and American culture has got into them with these NGOs, by the way, mostly. They prefer West. So these tensions are mostly cultural and mostly cultural, and there is no more material needs or economic preparations now, because we all know that Russia is an oligarchic capitalism, and the same is USA. If they don't want to admit it, it's still oligarchy, and yeah, it's now not as simple to say which one people want. But the main problem is, as we as socialists, what do we do? We understand the reality. Reality is that Russia is the biggest country on the earth, and it's our neighbor. We are on the south border of it. So if we want it or not, we are on its political gravity. That's fact. We cannot change that. Most of the people think that Russia will collapse and divide in 10 or 15 different republics, and that's it. But that hasn't happened yet, and we cannot hold our breath before it does. So, if you're speaking realistically in real politics, then we should at least try to calm ourselves and try to find something in common with Russia. That's the fact, even if you like it or not, because you don't try to speak with friends, you try to speak with your enemies. And yes, Russia has occupied our territories. Yes, that's a fact. Okay, but still, we have to find a common ground and understand that right now we are in the state of survival. We have to survive. That's it.
Well, tell them not to hold their breath awaiting the breakup of Russia into 15 separate republics, because that way they'll die from lack of oxygen, and I wouldn't like that to happen. Ilia, thank you for that insight, that window into Georgia, a place that we don't often feature, don't often hear about.